Hello again, Geo students. This set of notes is your migration notes, and in this set, we are going to answer two questions. One, why do people migrate? And two, where is the migration distributed throughout the world as well as within the United States? A couple terms you want to be familiar with. Immigration versus immigration. Immigration is the term used for people leaving a country, so that's the out. Immigration with an I is measuring the number of people coming into or arriving in a country or new place. Another term to be familiar with is net migration, which is the difference between emigration and the immigration. So I put a formula there for you, emigration minus immigration numbers. The last set of terms we want to be familiar with as we go through this presentation are push and pull factors. I believe you were exposed to those last year and spent some time with them, but we need to circle back to them. These are push factors are things that push people away from where they originally live, and the pull factors are things that encourage people to move into a new place. So the most common pull factor and push factor that we see is the economic reasons, mainly jobs. So people leave one place for a job, they find a better job somewhere else, and so they improve their life economically. Other reasons might be cultural, and an example of a push factor that's a cultural reason is a forced migration situation or where you have refugees. So you might have a political condition where there's a civil war within a country or unsafe conditions, and so people who want a safer life for their family leave and look for a new place to live. Also, environmental reasons can be push or pull factors. My wife says she would love to leave Minnesota in the cold winters. That would be a push factor, and move out to the West Coast where the climate is much warmer. That is a pull factor. When you look at the map of immigration to Minnesota from the previous decade, you can see that the largest amount of immigrants to Minnesota during that decade were from Somalia on the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia and Mexico were not too far behind, as well as China, India, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, and the rest fall in that third tier on this choropleth. When you look at global distribution of migration, there are regions of the world that are sending larger numbers, or people are immigrating with an E, and then the receiving regions where the people are immigrating with an I. Your sending regions are Asia, Latin America, and Africa. Your receiving regions are North America, Europe, and Oceania. The largest flows of immigrants that we see are leaving Asia and going to Europe or North America, or they are leaving Latin America and coming to North America. The United States has the highest number of foreign-born immigrants of any country in the world, with over 40 million. This map shows migration flows. And so what we mean by that is where you're looking at the arrows. The largest two arrows you can see are leaving Asia. One of them is pointing to Europe, the other is pointing to North America. Other large flows there, you can see a larger arrow pointing from Latin America to North America, and you see one from Asia to Oceania. Oceania has the largest number of arrows going to it, with 5. North America probably has the largest number of annual net migration, just based on the size of the 4 arrows that are pointing there. This world map shows the net migration in countries that are in red. The deeper the red color, the larger number of people coming into the country than there are leaving the country. The net out-migration of the countries that are the deepest blue are those that are finding the largest number of citizens leaving. So you can see mainly south of the equator, we have a large percentage of net out-migration. And you see North America and Europe and Australia and New Zealand having the largest amount of net in-migration. When you look at the United States specifically, over time, over the last 200 years, you see there's quite a bit of European and Canadian immigration from 1820 through 1920, Once we end World War II, the amount of people immigrating from Asia and Latin America and Africa is growing. So today, when you go to the far right side of the graph, Africa and Latin America are providing some of the largest flows of immigrants. Another facet of immigration that we need to consider is illegal immigration, or unauthorized or undocumented immigrants. These are people who are leaving their home country, arriving in another country, but not using the legal channels to do it. Many times that's going to happen because there's urgency in leaving where they originally are from and needing to get out and getting to someplace safe. And waiting 2 to 5 years for that to happen sometimes isn't going to be in their best interest. In the United States, we have approximately between 12 to 15 million unauthorized or undocumented immigrants. 80% come from Latin America, which is logical when you consider that Latin America has a land bridge or is attached to the United States. Most people, as we've said before in these notes, are leaving for economic reasons or seeking employment. 3 out of every 4 are employed in construction or labor or food service or agriculture, and they comprise about 5% of the labor force. And they are an important component to our economy as they perform jobs that most U.S. citizens don't seek out or don't want to do. When you look at the migration to the United States in thousands, the largest come from Mexico. The second largest group coming from Cuba has a lot to do with proximity of those countries to the United States. They are the closest. You can see Dominican Republic, Haiti, Colombia are in that next tier. Some of that has to do with environmental factors or political factors. When you examine the United States closely, the largest number of undocumented immigrants coming into the country are coming through the border with Mexico or across the water from Cuba. When you look at where immigrants settle, a large factor has to do with the proximity. So where they enter the country is going to be most likely where they settle. So you find a large Latin American population in the southern United States. In fact, historically, when you look at the United States, the southwestern U.S. was once a part of Mexico. So it's logical that there are a lot of families that have close ties to Mexico City. In fact, probably ties closer to Mexico City than they do Washington, D.C. And on the West Coast, you find people entering from Asia. The first place they're going to land is going to be on the Pacific coast. Another reason why the immigrant settlement is going to be larger in the South and Western United States is due to economics, where the jobs are located. Immigrants will settle in larger cities where there are other groups of immigrants that are from their home country. And when that happens, that's known as chain migration. In other words, migration that is going to establish cultural and family communities. When you look at Minneapolis and St. Paul, we have a large Hmong population in St. Paul and a bit over in the western side of Minneapolis as well. The Hmong population is larger in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area because the climate here and in Milwaukee are similar to what you find in Laos. And the reason why there's a large migrant flow from Laos to the United States is it was part of an agreement the U.S. government made with the Hmong during the Vietnam War. The Hmong helped the U.S. troops out, and in exchange, then it allowed for migration flows to open up between the two countries. Next is our Hispanic population, and West St. Paul and the southern part of St. Paul in Cherokee Park and along Robert Street holds the largest Hispanic population in the Twin Cities area. Our U.S. immigrant policy, we want to take a moment to look at that. Preferences for admission are given to immigrants who are looking, one, to reunify with family members that are already in the country. Workers who are refugees who have high level of skills, which can lead to a term that you see highlighted called brain drain, and that's the loss of a skilled worker from a country that someone is emigrating from, and a gain of the brain power to the country that the person is immigrating to. The average wait to get into the United States is 5 years. There are exceptions to the U.S. quota laws that the government has. In other words, a cap or an ideal number that they want to allow in, and generally not go over that. One would be if the immigrant is granted refugee status because it's too dangerous to send them back to their home country. And the other exception of the quota law would be if they are a family of any U.S. citizens. Another type of migration, not between countries, would be within a country, internal migration or domestic migration. And in the United States, we've seen growth in two parts of the country in the last quarter century, the southern United States and the western United States. And again, the largest reason for this is economic reasons. A lot of manufacturing jobs in the last half century have moved from the Great Lakes area known as the Rust Belt to the southern United States in a region that we call the Sun Belt. And in the West, we've seen tech companies pop up from Seattle all the way down the coast to California, and those are popular places for people of high-level skills to get jobs, so they are migrating from other parts of the country to those jobs, such as Silicon Valley. When you look at the United States history, the center of the U.S. population has continually moved south and west. On this graphic, you can see the center of the U.S. population right around 1800 was actually in Maryland, and keep in mind, other states hadn't been established by 1800, so that's also part of the reason is as people continued to move westward and the U.S. added more territory, the center of the population of the country would continue to move west for sure. But around 1940, 1950, you can see that it really starts trending towards the south as well. And that's as manufacturing jobs were leaving the northern part of the United States, heading to the southern part of the U.S. This is a map by county in the U.S. showing net migration. So again, the counties in red are the ones that are gaining people. The counties in blue, darkest blue, are losing people. Agricultural jobs have been lost because of technology, so there's not as need for as many people. So you can see the breadbasket of the United States, the Dakotas, Nebraska, Kansas, and such. There's quite a bit of out-migration, and people have been moving west or to the southeast part of the United States, where it's the most red. Here I mentioned the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt earlier. The Rust Belt is that old industrial area from Michigan all the way through to the East Coast near Philadelphia and New York City. And now a lot of manufacturing jobs are contained in the Sun Belt region, which ranges from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, California to Florida. These are migration flows measuring migration in the United States in the 1990s and 2000s, so you can see where large numbers of people are traveling back and forth. Another type of even larger scale migration that we could look at is just the migration within a city itself, and a concept that we'll come back to in Human Geography B called urban sprawl is a consequence of the migration from people living in the inner city to the suburbs. Even looking at Minneapolis, St. Paul on the graph that's on your slide, from 1950 forward, you'd see the population of the suburbs have continually shot up. Minneapolis and St. Paul's populations have held relatively steady all the way back to 1900. That's the end of migration. You have a note check that you need to complete. So use these notes. Feel free to go back into them and review them. And I also provided you with just the set of slides. So use those two things to help you complete the note check. Thank you for listening.